From the unbelievable remains of a real-life unicorn to the truth of flying dragons on Earth, here are 10 amazing creatures people thought were fake but aren't. Number 10. Chupacabra. The Chupacabra may have just been spotted in Texas. A man witnessed a creature looking like the legendary Chupacabra skulking through West Houston. The sighting of the animal was caught on camera, and it seems to show a skinny, dog-like monster hurrying through a residential neighborhood as quickly as its freaky little legs could carry it. Some people have denounced the possibility of the animal being a monster, claiming that it was probably just a mangy dog or a sick coyote. But if you look closely enough, it definitely looks like a mythical blood-sucking creature. Of course, skeptics immediately call something like this fake, but those who believe will tell you that it's evidence of the mythical beast that has been noted to suck the blood out of goats and other farm animals in the depth of night. Of course, the mythical Chupacabra has been a legend primarily in places like Mexico and Puerto Rico, so it's definitely rare to see it in Texas. Perhaps it crossed the border while no one was watching. This is one of those animals that biologists are adamant doesn't exist. And while they may be right, sightings like this really do make you question. The Chupacabra is undoubtedly real, it just might be a mangy coyote instead of a wild vampire. Number 9. American Loch Ness Monster. Lake Champlain is a huge body of water in both New York, Vermont and Quebec. The lake is a nice spot for boating and fishing, and it also happens to hold America's own version of the Loch Ness Monster. Legends of a monster living in Lake Champlain go back to the native Iroquois of the region. When French explorers arrived in the 18th century, they were warned against disturbing the waters of the lake as there was a giant serpent living inside. Then, in the later part of the 1800s, sightings of the monster began to seriously heat up. There was even a New York Times article about a railroad crew that had witnessed the serpent firsthand in Lake Champlain, saying that it had bright and silver scales that glistened in the sunlight. By 1992, at least 600 people had claimed to witness the Lake Champlain monster. There were even photos taken throughout the 90s, and that was when the comparison to the Loch Ness Monster started. Many of the photos were too blurry or out of focus to properly show if there really was a monster, but despite the controversy, there's no doubt that something large and frightening definitely lives in Lake Champlain, whether it's a small family of marine reptiles or the Loch Ness Monster's cousin. Number 8. Mermaids. Mermaids are supposed to be the stuff of legends. Nonetheless, there have been mermaid sightings documented ever since man could document anything. Mermaids have been sighted by people in the military, by tourists visiting the beach, and even by scuba divers. In fact, there have been so many convincing sightings of mermaids that they could very well be creatures of legend that actually exist. One of the most fascinating mermaid sightings came during World War II, when a group of Japanese soldiers spotted strange creatures during the 1940s while stationed in Indonesia. The soldiers all witnessed humanoid creatures with pink skin, fishy mouths, and the arms and legs of a frog. These weren't your typical mermaids, but they were definitely weird sea people that were apparently making gurgling and burping noises and then vanished into the water after being spotted. The local villagers already knew about these sea creatures and called them orang ikan, which translates to English as man-fish. If local villagers knew about these creatures, it's likely that they were actually a legitimate species or natural phenomenon, but scientists didn't believe them. Now, these sightings obviously haven't been verified, but it really makes you wonder if an ancient race of sea people really had been living around the Indonesian islands, but have since gone extinct just like the dodo bird. Have you ever seen a mermaid? Or something similarly mythical that you weren't able to classify? What do you think it was? Tell me about it in the comment section below. Then, before you forget, hit the subscribe button now to stay on top of all the latest videos right here on Epic Wildlife. Number 7. The Devil Bird. The Devil Bird of Sri Lanka is shrouded in legend and mystery. Its cry is said to be an omen of death, with those who hear its shriek at night almost certain to lose a loved one the next day. The original story from Sri Lankan legend says that a mother lost her daughter in a tragic accident and was driven to such despair that she ran into the forest shrieking and turned into the devil bird, known by locals as the ulama. Ever since, she has been screeching at night, acting as a harbinger of death. But the interesting thing is that the devil bird may actually exist. In 2001, a new type of bird was found that locals immediately recognized as the devil bird from legend. It turned out to be a spot-bellied owl, an extremely mysterious owl with a shrill call. This owl is almost never seen by people. Biologists don't really know much about it, and to this day, many locals in Sri Lanka still believe it to be the true devil bird, warning people of imminent doom with its ghostly night calls. Number 6. The Platypus. The platypus is a prime example of an animal that people thought was fake but turned out to be real. The first Western person to ever describe a platypus was a zoologist named George Shaw, who received a sample of the animal's pelt from Australia in 1799. According to Ripley's Believe It or Not, at first, George thought someone was playing a joke on him. That makes sense, because the platypus is so bizarre that it looks like it has to be a hoax. After all, it has a duck bill, flippers, and yet it's hairy. It couldn't possibly be real, right? At least, that's what Dr. Shaw thought. He assumed someone took the bill of a duck, the pelt of a mole or an otter, and then sent them to England as a practical joke. He even cut the skin apart to try and locate stitches, though of course he couldn't find any. George Shaw drew the first picture of the platypus, which actually turned out to be shockingly close, even though he had never seen the animal before. Still, the English people were skeptical and didn't believe in the platypus for another 100 years after it was first discovered. Of course, people in Australia already knew about the platypus, but on the other side of the world, it wouldn't be until the late 1800s that the platypus was accepted as a real animal by the public. Number 5. The Takahe. The Takahe is a bird that came back from the dead. This large chicken-like creature was first described as a new species in 1851 by Dr. Walter Mantell after the second specimen was captured. At the time, Dr. Mantell wrote that it would be very unlikely for any other living specimens of the Takahe to be found. And he was right. According to New Zealand Geographic, 2 additional birds were found following its classification, and the bird was then declared extinct. The bird remained extinct until 1948, when someone spotted one in New Zealand. An expedition was mounted to find the bird, and a small flock of them were discovered in one of the remotest places in New Zealand, known as Fiordland. It turned out that this small, rather strange-looking bird had somehow survived extinction. With the help of conservationists, the Takahe's numbers increased, and fast forward to 2019, and there are about 418 of them still living on the planet, though they are still critically vulnerable. Number 4. A real unicorn. The remains of a real unicorn that lived roughly 30,000 years ago were just found in Kazakhstan. This is shocking for a few reasons. First, unicorns aren't supposed to exist. Secondly, the animal, which is known scientifically as the Elasmotherion sibiricus, was supposed to have gone extinct 350,000 years ago. But these newest fossilized remains show that the hairy unicorn was still wandering through ancient Russia 29,000 years before today. According to Andrei Shpansky from the Tomsk State University, Western Siberia was probably the last refuge for these mythical horned creatures. But I have some pretty bad news, as the real unicorns that lived on Earth didn't look quite like what you're probably imagining. Our fantasy images of unicorns aren't realistic, but it's likely that the legend of the unicorn was related to ancient people encountering this animal. This was an ancient species of rhinoceros that had exceptionally long horns. They were definitely not horses, they certainly weren't pure white, and they didn't have spiral horns made of gold and rainbows. Instead, they looked like woolly rhinos with curved tusks sticking out of their heads. But despite the differences, these beasts may have been the original inspiration for what we think of today as a mythical unicorn. Number 3. The Okapi. The creature found by the Russian miners has been referred to as a monster mummy, and nobody is really sure what it is. The Okapi is the strangest animal on Earth that absolutely has no business existing. In fact, if you were to show pictures of the Okapi to one of your friends, they would probably call you a liar and denounce the pictures as fake. After all, the Okapi has the black and white stripes of a zebra, it has the head of a giraffe, and it has the body shape of a deer. The Okapi is a weird amalgamation of half a dozen African animals, and it lives primarily in dense rainforests in Central Africa. Scientists didn't even know these animals existed until 1900, according to the San Diego Zoo. Okapis are secretive, they stay as far away from humans as possible, and it's been estimated that there are only about 25,000 of them left in the wild. They are the only relatives of the giraffe, and yeah, they 100% look like they've been photoshopped. If you ever encounter an Okapi in the wild, get a picture. People may think you're trying to fool them, but you'll know the truth. You found one of the most incredible real animals that looks like a hybrid species in the world. Number 2. A mysterious monster. A small group of miners working in a remote region of Russia recently discovered a bizarre animal that, at first, nobody believed really existed. The freaky creature was pulled out of the frozen sand in an area where the average daily temperature hovers around -45 degrees Fahrenheit. Because of the extreme cold, the mummified beast was discovered in pristine condition, with its fangs and claws still intact. Even more interesting is that the frozen sand in which the creature was discovered dates all the way back to the Mesozoic era, which means it could be between 252 and 66 million years old. After the discovery of the strange monster, it was taken back to the nearest major cities that it could be examined by scientists. Some estimate that the creature could be a previously unknown dinosaur, while others say it could be an extinct type of wolverine. Nobody really knows what the creature is, but one thing for sure, it's definitely real. Number 1. Real dragons. It's generally agreed that dragons don't exist. However, you might be interested to know just how close a real, breathing dragon was to existing on our planet. You have to remember that ancient cultures actually believed dragons existed, specifically in China, where they often interpreted the bones of dinosaurs as belonging to dragons. It wasn't until more recently that humans looked at dragons as mythical beasts. But these animals may have been a bit more real than we give them credit for. For example, when comparing the long dragons of ancient China, the drakon from ancient Greece, and the worm from Old England, we see that different cultures on Earth all had the exact same ideas of what dragons looked like. These creatures were long, they had very small legs, or no legs at all, and they looked a lot like snakes. Now, there happens to be fossil evidence suggesting that snakes evolved from lizards, and as they were evolving, their legs were shrinking and gradually disappearing. This actually fits perfectly with the description of ancient dragons. Now, if we look back a few million years, we'll be looking at the Earth during a time when the Titanoboa was the largest snake ever, with a monstrous length of 40 feet. If you make the assumption that at some point the Titanoboa may have been even larger and had short little legs, it basically could have been a real-life dragon, or pretty close to it. Which of these animals would you like to see in real life? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and come back soon for another awesome video.